Okay, thank you for joining. So in today's session, we're starting a new unit, which is software development methodologies. So what we cover in today's session, we're going to cover all the type of system development life cycles that software companies use when it comes to developing softwares or completing any sort of project. So let's look into understanding what is a software development, which it is simply the process of designing, testing, and implementing new software applications or programs. So it is simply the process of realization of a software where we start from initial phase of gathering data, raw informations that we will now need to now utilize it to create our software. So there are various types of life cycles. So let's look into what a life cycle is. This also is going to refer to as the application development life cycles. So this in turn is used in a system engineering, information system, and software engineering to describe the process that's related for planning, development, and testing of and deployment of our information system. Also, when it comes to our life cycle, in the past, companies used to use some traditional life cycles, such as waterfall model. And moving on, companies have now developed new life cycle, new approaches, which allows them to easily scale the software and work more efficiently. And they've now introduced new methodology, which allows them to perform more efficiently, such as agile methodology or Scrum or Kanban, and all these type of methodology will now allow them to process to create in less time and in most efficient way. So each process model will now follow, for instance, some particular life cycle in order to ensure success of the process of the software development. So all of them will now have more or less the same steps, but they will now be done in a different way. So when it comes for each process model, we now follow a particular life cycle. And so most of them will always have a gathering information phase, design, implementation, where we will now involve the coding part, testing, deploying, and lastly, we now have to maintain. So we have to be able to gather useful feedback in order for us to improve the software. Okay. Each phase will now produce a deliverable required by the next phase. So as we know, they all correlate to each other. So when it comes to look into a waterfall model, we will now work in a cascade way, where each of them will now fall into place, and you can easily go back to the previous one. So as we can see, the software development methodology or system development, it is a framework that is used to structure, plan, and control the process of developing an information system. So as we can see here, we have various of them. So we have agile software development, crystal method, dynamic system development, extreme programming, features-driven development, joint application development, learn development, rapid application, rational unified process, Scrum, Spiral, system development life cycle, and waterfall. So here we do have an article which can be interesting to have a look if you're interested in having a look at it. So this is a waterfall model where we can see everything follow a very linear process. So we have a requirement definition, system and software design. Then you now go into implementation and unit testing. Then we have integration of system testing and operation and maintenance. So as you can see from the image, they will now all be allowed to go back to the previous phase in case there are some amend or anything that needs to be changed in order for this the system to work efficiently. So waterfall was one of the first model, and it was used. I mean, it is still used, but it was mainly used at the early 2000s until companies now decided to work with agile. As you can see here, the waterfall, there are separate identify phase in the waterfall model. So there are requirement analysis and definition, system and software design, implementation and unit testing, integration and system testing, operation and maintenance. So as you can see, the main drawback for the waterfall model is the difficulty of accommodate changes. So whenever one of the phase has been completed, this will now become very difficult to go back and amend the previous one. Also, there are inflexible partitioning. So of the project into the district stage will now make it difficult to respond to the changing customer requirements. So as we can see there for this model, is only appropriate when the requirements are well understood and changes will be fairly limited during the design process. So we can see there are a few business systems which have stable requirements. So the waterfall model is mostly used for large system engineering project where a system is developed in several sites. Here we have an image of the V-shaped model where you always start from a requirement of analysis, then you're going to design, have a system design, and then you will now fall into a model design, and they all now have to relate to the coding, where there is the actual programming of the software. So the V model in the system development is where the execution of process happens in a sequential manner. That means it's going to happen in a V shape. And it is also known as verification and validation model. So where, for instance, before moving to another phase, to another stage, it is very important to verify and consolidate that everything that has been done is appropriate and effective. So with the V model, it is an extension of a waterfall, for instance, and it is now based on the association of testing phase for each corresponding development stage. So this is very important to understand the difference between waterfall and the V shape. Now we also have a spiral model where it is more a risk-driven process. And what do we mean by this? This is based on a unique risk pattern of a given project. So the spiral model will now guide the team to adopt element of one or more process model. So as we can see, we start from a starting phase where we have gathered the information. We now have a risk analysis. Then we now move into the next steps where we now have our prototype. We now test this prototype and we need to consolidate and validate everything until we'll now be allowed to release our software. So the image explains in more detail. Now we'll look into the difference between application software and the system software. So what do we mean by application software? This is simply a computer software which is designed to help users and individuals to perform specific tasks. While with the system software, it is the computer software designed to operate the computer hardware and to provide a platform for running application software. So system software, we can look at this as Windows operating system or Mac or Linux operating system, while application are simply software that are running on top of our system application. So with the system software, we can now create its own environment to run itself and run other applications. So let's look into a video which will now give us a explanation of system development lifecycle. So let's look into extreme programming. Just 1 second, let me just find my video. Okay, so here we have a comparison between two well-known system development life cycles.
Agile software development is all about incrementally delivering quality software to businesses. Today, we are reviewing two Agile methodologies, Scrum and Extreme Programming. Both of them build on top of certain principles and provide clear guidelines to product development. So, what is the Scrum methodology? Scrum has a simple and circular process with two constant elements of inspection and adaptation. The first is creating and maintaining ruthlessly ordered to-do lists, known as product backlogs. The second element refers to prioritizing items dedicated to different steps in short time periods. A Scrum team consists of a product owner, Scrum Master, and development team. The role of the product owner is to translate the customer's goals back to the team. A Scrum Master is the facilitator for a team clearing obstacles and ensuring good working relationships. The team works on the development and testing of every high-priority item through 7 steps: requirements formulation, UI/UX design, development, full testing, integration, documentation, and final approval. Projects are tangibly built, increment by increment. These tangible increments are then showcased to stakeholders for feedback. The new requirements generated by their feedback are placed in the product backlog and prioritized according to existing tasks. This is called the Scrum cycle. To ensure ongoing communication, there are daily Scrums, which is a 15-minute daily internal meeting. Don't you just hate those meetings? Share what you think in the comments. Next, Sprint Planning Meeting is used to plan the work that needs to be performed during the sprint. A Sprint Review Meeting is done at the end of the sprint to assess the achievements during the sprint and what should be done in the next sprint. Scrum can be used on any complex project. It specifically benefits the projects with cross-functional teams without constant interruptions from everyday business activities that require a quick feedback loop that use stakeholders' feedback to prioritize tasks for the next sprint. Now let's move on to extreme programming. Extreme programming, XP, is a lightweight, efficient, flexible way to develop software. It derives its name from taking elements of traditional software engineering practices to extreme levels. XP is based on specific planning approach, on-site customer, and continuous testing. Extreme programming takes traditional principles to extreme levels through a number of practices. The XP practices include simple design, pair programming, constant testing, ongoing integration, refactoring, coding standards, and small releases. Let's clear up some of the terms. Pair programming is the practice of having two people simultaneously working together on all production code. Continuous integration is the practice of integrating the system several times per day every time a task is completed by a developer. Pair. Integration in XP is supported by tests like unit testing and functional testing. Refactoring in XP is the practice of restructuring a program or implementing a feature without changing the behavior of the system. XP projects have three phases, namely the release planning phase, iteration phase, and the release phase. In the release planning phase, the customer writes stories based on requirements. The programmers estimate them, and the customer chooses the order in which stories will be developed. In the iteration phase, the customer writes tests and answers questions, while the developers develop software according to the stories. The iteration phase provides ready-to-go software. Thirdly, in the release phase, the programmers install the software, and the customer approves the result. XP works best for small to mid-sized teams developing software, working in the midst of vague or fast-changing requirements. Would you like to learn more about the product development process? Check out the link in the description box. So, what do XP and Scrum have in common? Both Scrum and Extreme Programming divide the development process into sprints, have a planning meeting before the development starts, and pinpoint user stories during such meetings. They also both imply having a planning meeting before each sprint as well. Their goals are similar. What is the difference between Scrum and XP? The main difference is their primary focus. Scrum is heavily focused on management itself. It deals with the activity done besides coding, as it does not give much technical and engineering emphasis on how work is actually done or how a product is actually built. On the other hand, Extreme Programming concentrates programming and coding and the test-driven approach. Sprints are a bit different too. Scrum sprints last for 2 to 4 weeks, and their length is quite flexible. Under XP, however, there are shorter iterations of 1, sometimes 2 weeks to develop a working system. The aim of an XP sprint is not focused on product release, but on creating a working bug-free system. In turn, Scrum sprints are supposed to result in a working product. XP is more flexible when it comes to changes. Unlike in Scrum, changes can be made by the customer during the sprint itself. When it comes to prioritizing tasks, in Scrum, developers determine the order of their actions themselves. In XP, teams follow strict orders according to priority and requirement. The two frameworks discussed, Scrum and XP, both focus on delivering a high-quality product to the customer as fast as possible. There is no universally best framework suitable for all cases. Each of them has its pros, cons, and use cases. If you don't know how to settle on just one framework, what you can do is combine Scrum and XP. If you don't know from where to start, contact Jelvix, and we will help you implement your idea into life. We provide consulting, software development, and design services.
Okay, so this video gave us a good understanding of two different of system development life cycle and how these are implemented within these tech companies. So I'll say this is everything for today's session. Is there any question?
There's no question.
Thank you very much for joining, then I will see you tomorrow. Bye.